everyone, and welcome to the RV Inspection and Care podcast and video. I'm Dwayne. I'm a certified RV inspector, and today we're going to be talking about flat towing versus dolly towing for RV travel. Now, who needs to even consider towing another vehicle along with them on their RV travels? Well, not anyone who has a towable RV, like a travel trailer or a fifth wheel. That's because you have a tow vehicle that's pulling it down the road. So when you get to where you're going, you unhook and the tow vehicle becomes your day-to-day driver that you use. But if you have a motorhome, you might want to consider towing another vehicle with you. Not all motorhomes require that, though. For instance, smaller ones like Class Bs, some Class B pluses, some Class Cs, they're small enough that you can use that RV for both your camp vehicle and your daily driver as well. Now, what it means, though, is that if you're in an RV park or campground, well, you're going to have to unhook your electric, your water, your sewer every time, and then go make your errand or trip and then come back and rehook it all back up. Now, as long as you're okay with those inconveniences, then it works just fine and you don't need to take another vehicle with you. But when we're talking about larger motorhomes, like Class Cs that are larger, Class As, Super Cs, and so on, well, you really should consider taking another vehicle along with you, because using those big RVs as your daily driver is very cumbersome. It's difficult to get around in tight areas, and it costs you more fuel-wise as well. So the larger your motorhome is, the more you really should consider having a towed vehicle. Well, what kind of towing is best then? There's two main kinds that you'll see out there. That's flat towing and dolly towing. Now, before we get into the pros and cons, let me mention there's three things you're going to need for any form of towing that you do. Number one, you have to have the method itself, the flat tow or dolly tow. Number two, you've got to have a braking system for that vehicle back there, because you can't expect all that weight to be put on the brakes of your motorhome every time that you go to stop. It's not safe. And then you're going to need a lighting system for that vehicle as well to be legal in all states that you'll travel in. All right, having considered all that, let's get to the pros and the cons. The number one pro of flat towing is it's so easy to connect and then disconnect. Yes, there's really not a lot to it. There's not a lot of time involved, just a few connections and you're off. And when you connect back up, it's very simple, very easy. So that's a big advantage. The second pro, there's very little physical work that's required to set up a flat tow vehicle. It's not hard. Again, it's almost something that anyone could do. So if you have some physical challenges, flat towing might be your best solution there by far. Now, the next pro is very little storage is required for the equipment that you use for flat towing. In fact, most of it can fit in a small box, and then you just store it away until you need to take the next trip, and then you bring it out and set it up. So not much storage space is used at all. The last pro we're going to talk about is that flat towing works kind of like a dream. It just tracks so well behind an RV. And that's because it has the same turning radius as the RV, so it really follows along well. When you're going around corners, you really appreciate it because you don't have to really worry so much about it cutting off a corner on you. So those are all pros of flat towing. But there are cons too, and the number one con is the expense, because it can be expensive, much more so than tow dollies. Now, it all depends on how you get your equipment for flat towing. If you choose new or if you choose used, you can save quite a bit by getting used equipment. And it depends on how you handle that braking system and lighting system that I mentioned earlier. If you hardwire that into the vehicle, well, then your expense really goes up at that point. Of course, it's very convenient for that, but the expense goes up. So these days, you can expect to spend somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000 to set up a vehicle for flat towing. And that's a real issue for some RVers. Now, the next con is that tow vehicles that can be flat towed are very limited. You can't just take any vehicle, pull it up behind your motorhome, hook it up, and off you go. They have to be designed from the factory to be able to be flat towed, and especially the transmission. Otherwise, you'll just tear it up. So that really limits the selection of vehicles that you can use for towing. The next con is battery concerns for flat towed vehicles. That's because when you have all four wheels on the ground, the front wheels need to be able to turn as you go. To do that, the steering wheel must be unlocked. And to do that, you have to take the ignition key, put it in the ignition, and turn it to the on position. Well, then you're going down the road towing with the ignition on the whole way. And obviously, that can be a real drain on your battery. So there's ways of getting around it. It's not the end of the world, but it is another consideration. The last one we're going to talk about that is a con for flat-towed vehicles is selling that vehicle. Because very often you'll have hard decisions to make about the braking and the lighting. Now, if you're using auxiliary brakes and lighting, well, you just transfer that to the next vehicle. But if it's hardwired, are you going to let that big expense just go with that vehicle? Or are you going to go to the time and effort it takes to remove all that and make sure you do it right when you sell the vehicle? Also, when you are flat towing, every vehicle must have a faceplate that connects up to the tow bar. That faceplate is made for that vehicle. So when you sell that vehicle, you pretty much have to let the base plate just go with it and buy another one. So you can see there are some cons when it comes to selling the vehicle you have been using for flat towing. Well, let's get to dolly towing now and to the pros. Number one on the list is the cost, because it's often half the cost of flat towing. And that's huge for a lot of RVers, especially those just getting started. The next pro is that there's a wide range of vehicles that you can choose from for dolly towing. Nowhere near as limited as flat towing. So that makes it easy to choose a vehicle that you want and that you like for taking along with you. The third pro is there are no battery concerns with dolly towing. In fact, you want those wheels as stationary as possible. They must be locked in place on that dolly. So there's no ignition key or any of that involved. And that is a nice thing. No battery problems. The last pro is that you can change the towed vehicle very easily if you're using it on a tow dolly, because you really haven't done anything major to change that vehicle. So you can just back it off the dolly, sell it, get your next vehicle and pull it on. It's really that simple. No big, hard decisions that have to be made in that case. All right, now let's talk about the cons of tow dollies. And the number one con is the time and effort it takes to set up and to take it apart from your RV when you get where you're going. I mean, it really is a lot more time. It's not the end of the world, but it is more time and effort, much more than flat towing. The next con is it not only requires time and effort, but physical effort to remove and to set up that vehicle on the tow dolly. That's because you have to move the tow dolly around, number one, and tow dollies are not necessarily totally light. And when you pull the vehicle up onto the tow dolly, you've got to ratchet down those front wheels and really tie them down well so that while you're going down the road, it doesn't loosen up and come off the dolly. Well, that takes a certain amount of physical effort and strength. So if you have some physical issues along that line, then tow dolly towing may not be your best choice. And the final con we're going to talk about with tow dollies is every time you stop, wherever you stop, you're going to need to find a spot for the tow dolly. And in some campgrounds and parks, you're kind of limited in the space or the campsite you get. So you have to get very creative with places to store the tow dolly. Now, this isn't a super big problem. You'll see a lot of dolly users that have figured out very unique ways of storing their dolly when not in use, but it is another consideration. All right, those are the pros and the cons of flat towing versus tow dollies. Let me condense it all down into a couple of short statements. Number one, flat towing is easy, but it can be expensive. Tow dollies are much cheaper, but they have some real challenges. So that's really what it all boils down to. But let me say this. Either method is fine. Either one works very well. You're going to see a lot of people going down the road that are flat towing their vehicle behind them and very happy with it. You're going to see a lot of other people going down the road with their RV with a tow dolly and the vehicle on it, and they're very happy with it. So either way works fine. What I recommend, go back and review the pros and the cons that I've covered today, and then choose the one that you feel fits you best. Well, that's it for now. Have safe and happy travels, my friends. Until next time.